Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I'm Baz Barrett. I'm not joined by Will Forrest, Mr. Talk of the Trinity himself, but I am joined by a special guest. I'm joined by Mike to get the Watford perspective on the upcoming game. Mike from the Voices of the Vic podcast. So, evening to you, Mike. Thanks for joining us. Much appreciated.
No, thank you very much for having me on. I'm looking forward to talking about the game. Well, yes, looking forward to talking about the game on Saturday. I probably won't enjoy the game as much as I enjoy looking forward to speaking about it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it, mate.
No, it's the hope that kills you. It's a common feeling as a Villa fan. But I suppose speaking of hope, obviously the teams first met on the opening day, Vicarage Road. Sun was shining, 3-2 win for Watford. Safe to say things have happened down at Vicarage Road since then, onto the third manager of the season.
Yeah.
How has it been from a Watford perspective? Is it just a normal season for Watford in terms of the managerial challenges?
I suppose it is. You know, you look at last season when we went up from the Championship, which was some achievement within itself to come straight back up. I know, obviously, Villa didn't quite emulate coming up at the first hurdle, but they got up eventually. And I think had we been dealt the hand of not coming straight back up and we'd have been in the Championship this season as well, I think we would have struggled. But that's where Villa sort of strengthens. They did very well to get up after the relegation from the Premier League. But the season that we went up, we had two managers. You know, Vladimir Ivic, we started the season with, then Xisco Munoz come through and got the job done. But I think before the season even started, we sort of knew. Well, I don't know whether "knew" is the right word, but we had a feeling that Xisco Munoz wasn't going to be the man to lead us through the whole of the season. A, because we don't tend to keep a manager for the whole of the season, and B, and more seriously, we were worried that he was going to be too underqualified. You know, I think it's not very well publicised, but Xisco Munoz actually had special access from the Premier League to do the relevant badges that he needed in order to coach in the Premier League, because at the time of our promotion and with everything with lockdown and everything, he didn't have the current qualifications or the badges that he needed to coach in the Premier League. But the Premier League give him special dispensation to manage in the Premier League whilst taking those coaching badges, where usually you would have to obtain them first before managing. So there was that worry. And the worry of he's going to be out of his depth. You know, he come in from the Georgian league, Dynamo Tbilisi. Don't worry for those listening. I've never heard of them either, and you know, it was my club that appointed the manager from them. So, yeah, it was very much a case of he was a yes man. Everything had got so disciplined and so straight talking and so stone faced under Vladimir Ivic. It went really, really sour. And then Xisco come in. He was smiling in his press conference. He was a perfect yes man. Things didn't quite go to plan for him to start with. And then, you know, we beat Bristol City 6-0 last season, and that was a turning point. So, you know, he was very much, the players loved him. You know, that Villa game was the first game really where we had a full capacity stadium. There was a couple of games last season where you were allowed so many over a capacity of 20,000 or some ridiculous rule like that with lockdown. But the Villa game was the first time that a packed out Vicarage Road had seen Xisco Munoz, got to thank him for what he did with the club. And I think, if I'm being brutally honest, and Villa fans will probably look back at the game and think, well, actually, that makes sense. I think the only reason we won that game is because of the atmosphere and Xisco's first home game, and there was a bit of a bounce and you know, that backing that he had from the crowd as well. And you know, we made a real mess of trying to keep the lead. You know, 3-0 up, I think we were, and you guys pulled it back to 3-2, and it was made a very nervy ending for us, and it really shouldn't have been. So, yeah, a bit of a long way around your question. I'm not surprised that we're having the season that we're having. But I don't know. It's really tough to see where this is going to. I mean, personally, I know you were going to ask me this later. I think unfortunately we're already as good as gone. I think the defeat to Norwich, Christ, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now. That was that was the final nail in the coffin for me. So yeah, it's going to be a tough watch these last few games, but yeah, starting on Saturday, I just want to see an improvement from the last few games.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate from a Watford perspective that a relegation rival in Newcastle have found 100 million down the back of the sofa to spend in January.
Yes. Very frustrating.
Though the Claudio Ranieri era at Watford has already been and gone. From a outside perspective, I'll admit to being surprised by the appointment after his less than successful spell at Fulham previously. From a Watford fan perspective, was there a sense of excitement when Ranieri came, or was there a feeling of, oh dear?
No. Obviously, a few pointed out, as you rightly say, his time at Fulham wasn't exactly filled with glory, but you know, he had a relatively strong or decent season with, I think it was Sampdoria over in Italy. So, and he really stabilised them from being like one of the worst statistical-wise teams. You know, they were bottom of every sort of chart, if you like, you know, passing and sort of attacking movements, defensive mistakes. And, you know, he really solidified things at Sampdoria. So there was that element of, you know, he's done it before. The element of he's managed in the Premier League, so he knows that. Because the problem that, well, I say problem, it's worked and it hasn't worked, but the position we often find ourselves in as Watford fans is because of the way the Pozzos operate, we often tend to find a manager come in that is very much a hidden gem, if you like, that hasn't experienced the Premier League. So we thought, you know, we need someone to come in to steady the ship, someone that knows the division. Obviously, Ranieri did very well at Leicester. And you know, he had a spell at Chelsea as well, so you know, he knew the division, and you know, the people were relatively excited and thought, okay, this could be what we need to turn it around. And you know, gets walloped 5-0 on the debut game for him at home to Liverpool. But then, you know, we sort of write that off as a free hit. The next week we go and win 5-2 against Everton, and we think, right, here we go, we're in business now. And then we lose to Southampton at home 1-0. Then we lose to Arsenal at 1-0. And then we beat Man U. The Man U game, the 4-1, that was the last time we'd won. And that's in November. So we haven't won since November. So things very quickly started to sort of turn, and you could sort of see maybe the what had happened at Fulham start to creep in at Watford as well. And things turned very sour very quickly, unfortunately, as they do in the life of a manager.
I mean, the 4-1 win you mentioned against Man United was pretty much the end of Solskjaer. And unfortunately, the end for Ranieri came shortly afterwards. By the end, was there much sympathy amongst the fans with the Ranieri departure, or was there a feeling of, this isn't working, we need to try something else?
There was a feeling of, this isn't working, we need to try something else. But also as well, there was also a feeling, which is the first time I've seen it amongst Watford fans on social media, is they were sort of digging out the owners a little bit, as if to say, look, we keep changing our manager. Working like this in the long run isn't going to work. We need somebody to come in. You need to let them build something here at Watford, give them a project to work at, and really build from the you know, the bottom upwards. So a lot of people were sort of resigned to the fact that relegation was probably a massive possibility. After Ranieri had lost his job after the 3-0 defeat to Norwich at home, and there was that, right, accept that we're down, bring someone in till the end of the season, and then from next season, bring in somebody who's going to be here for a while and really build something at Watford. I mean, personally, myself speaking now, up until the season we went down in 1920, which is a season that I'm sure Villa fans will remember quite fondly, because right up until the death, it was us, West Ham and you boys sort of fighting it out to stay up. And we were that's the first season where I really thought maybe changing the managers isn't working. Every other season it's worked. We've stayed up. We had 5 successful seasons. Well, 5 seasons in the Premier League up until the relegation in 1920, which I'd say for a small club like Watford's pretty decent. And we chopped and changed managers then as well. So up until that 1920 season, that's the first time I've really thought, well, hang on a minute, we've got this wrong here. So, come the end of that season, I was really disappointed. So, yeah, to answer your question, I think people wanted Ranieri out. I took to Twitter after the game, as most fans do, when they're really annoyed after watching their team put in a gutless performance. And I think the thing that did my head in was, it was against Norwich. Dean Smith, when he was appointed, I said, that's a really good appointment. I know he didn't have the best of times towards the end of his time at you boys, but I think for Norwich, that's a really, really good appointment. And should they go down, I think Dean will do a really, really good job at bringing them back up and maybe sort of solidifying their chances of staying up in seasons to come in the Premier League. But when, I sort of thought we shouldn't be losing to a relegation rival this badly at home as well. So I think Ranieri knew as well that his time was up, and yeah, everyone was in agreement that, I don't think there was a single fan that was like, well, no, why are we sacking Ranieri? I think everybody was like, right, it was more a case of who do we bring in? What do we do? Do we bring someone into the end of the season? Do we bring someone in now? Say, look, we're probably going to go down. You've got 2-3 years to build something here and take a stab at it. And we opted for bring someone into the end of the season and try and bring in someone that's a firefighter, as they would say.
Yeah, I mean, usually in terms of managerial appointments, a club tends to go the opposite direction to the way their departed manager has been. So usually if you've gone for an older, more experienced manager, you go for a younger attacking manager. Watford appear to have gone for more of the same in respect of Roy Hodgson, an older defensive-minded manager. When the announcement was made that Hodgson was Watford's new manager, was there a feeling amongst the fan base of we've accepted from a board level that we're getting relegated this season and we're just looking to have somebody into the end of the season and rebuild in the Championship? Or was there a feeling that, Hodgson's actually a pretty good, shrewd appointment, has experience, keeping, with Palace, West Brom, for example, and there was actually a realistic shot of him keeping you up?
Yeah, a real mixed bag this time. Usually it's either heavily one-sided or they're in favour or they're heavily against, but it was really a mixed bag. We somehow managed to find the only manager sort of recently in the game older than Ranieri. So that's a typical Watford thing. But I think, like you highlighted there, me on a personal level, I thought it was a good appointment. There were question marks over Roy working with the owners because Roy Hodgson's had quite a decorative career, in England and abroad. And one of the jobs abroad was Udinese, who, of course, the Pozzos also own as well as us. And his time at Udinese wasn't quite the best. And there was a snippet from an interview that was found in a paper that Roy Hodgson didn't perhaps have the best of relationships with the Pozzos at the time of the Udinese departure for him back in 2001. So there was a little bit of worry of, hopefully, 21 years down the line, they've sort of sorted it out between them. But, Roy Hodgson seems to, he said in his press conference that everything's all good and that's all good. But I think, as you point out, he's done it before. West Brom, he took over in February at West Brom. I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 2011. But he took over in the February. They were in the bottom 3 and he led them to 11th. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute, certainly not saying that after seeing, the first 3 games under Roy Hodgson, but I'm not saying for 1 minute he's going to take us to 11th, but he's done it with West Brom. I seem to remember, Palace had that famous, they called it 007 because, 1-0, drawn 0 and lost 7, the first 7 of the season, and still stayed up. And I think they finished relatively comfortable in mid-table. So, and also, Roy Hodgson's assistant, Ray Lewington, was Watford manager back in 2002 to 2004, or it could be 2001 to 2004. I can't remember the years exactly, but he was manager back then. And we were in deep trouble back then. We were on the brink of administration. The players weren't getting paid on time. And he kept us up in the Championship, which back then for a club going through all that was a brilliant sort of season. He also led us to the League Cup semi-final, which we narrowly lost on aggregate to Liverpool. So Steven Gerrard's Liverpool, funnily enough. So, he did a brilliant job in such difficult circumstances. He knows the club. He knows what it means to the fans. So to bring Ray Lewington with him, we were like, okay, that's brilliant. That's surely only going to be, better to have someone in the background that knows the club already and knows what it means to play for the badge, sort of thing. So, I was really excited. I mean, his first game against Burnley, we drew 0-0, first clean sheet of the season. And how many games are we in? So, that speaks volumes for our season. The West Ham game, we were unlucky to lose. A cruel deflection meant that they won. And then the Brighton game, I'll be honest, I didn't watch it, but it sounded like it was dreadful. So it's very much, like you said, you know what you're going to get with Roy Hodgson. He's going to look after the defence first. And, usually for us, goals haven't been a problem. But unfortunately, the last few months, they have been. So we just need to find out, find the old manual on how to score a football goal, and hopefully we can get back up and running again in that respect. But I was very excited. Well, not excited, but I was positive with the appointment of Roy Hodgson.
And I think in terms of that goal scoring manual, I think Norwich have taken a copy. They were struggling for a short while, so I'm sure they'll be able to pass it over. But in terms of if Hodgson does manage the Great Escape and keeps Watford up, would you keep him next season? Or?
No. We, regardless of if he keeps us up, the guy deserves a statue, because we're in deep trouble. As you say, Newcastle have really pulled away, and Norwich seem to have a bit of fight in them. Burnley are as good as gone as us, to be honest. I think they're in trouble. But I think regardless of if he keeps us up or not, we need to bring someone new in, and maybe the Pozzos will sort of look at this and think, well, let's try and bring someone in for more long term, and they can build something here. So, as thankful as we would be, I think Roy knows, the club knows, the fans know, the owners know that this is only till the end of the season.
I mean, unfortunately, we were unable to help you out as regards keeping Newcastle on a leash based on our. It sounds like Villa were as bad as against Newcastle as Watford were against Brighton. So we'll skip over our last game and move on to the next game, Saturday, Villa Park, 3:00. Are you going in any way end, or will you be keeping an eye on the score from elsewhere?
No, well, as you and your listeners can probably tell, I have quite a broad Brummie accent, and I grew up in Birmingham. My grandmother lives just 10 minutes down the road from Villa Park, and I've got quite a few Aston Villa supporting mates, quite a few who are going, season ticket holders that are going. I am not going. Unfortunately, I can't make it. I manage a Saturday league team in Birmingham, and we've got a game on that Saturday. So I'll be on the sideline. That kicks off at 2:30. So I'll be on the sideline shouting my orders, and then every sort of 5 minutes checking my phone to see if there's any scores. And quite a few of my players are Villa fans as well. So I'm sure they'll want me to keep sort of track on the sideline. But it is one I usually go to. I unfortunately was there for the 2019-20 season, which I've tried to forget for the life of me, but I unfortunately can't. That last minute goal still kills me to this day, and I still to this day say that was the point where I knew we were relegated that season. I went one year, my mate's a season ticket holder in the Holt End, the season that we first come up, 15-16, which I think is the season that you boys went down.
Yep.
Troy Deeney scored twice. He scored in front of the Holt End. He then celebrated in front of the Holt Ends. And because I couldn't get a ticket in the away ends, my friend said, I've got a spare ticket next to me if you want to come and watch that, to sit very, very quietly in the Holt end and watch Troy Deeney celebrate right in front of me. So that was just as painful. But yeah, no, I'm gutted I won't be there because, as I say, it's got quite a high relevance for me personally. But to be honest, and I know this is quite boring and you might not want me to give this answer, but I'd be very, very surprised if it wasn't the 3 points staying at Villa Park this week, because I am slowly losing hope every week, and it's very, very rare that I say that. I like to try and stay positive, but I'm just not seeing anything positive whatsoever from the last few performances.
Well, at least you won't be there in person if it does go as badly as you're anticipating. I mean, that game 2015-2016, I was there, and it was one of the most bizarre games of football I can remember seeing, in terms of 3-2, relatively close on the scoreline, but from a Villa perspective, I think Adama Traore came on in the sub, and we were his head a little as regards why he hadn't come on before. But it was 3-2, so close on the scorecard, but there was never really any time in that game from a Villa perspective where I remember thinking we're going to get anything out of this game, which I think probably summed up during the rest of that season.
It certainly didn't feel like that for me. I remember, I think you guys scored the second, and Aurelio Gomez got injured that game, and we had to go to the bench to our Lithuanian goalkeeper, who never played. He was as skinny as anything, really lightweight, and there was a couple of shaky moments where he went to go and catch the ball. He dropped it a couple of times, and I was sitting in the Holt, and I was at a home game 2-1 up, and then it was also 3-2 that game. So that was more worrying as well. But I certainly thought that Villa might get back into it at Villa Park. But in the end, we stayed comfortable. But yeah, it's I don't think it's going to be a close one this weekend, unfortunately.
No, I mean, even if it is a close one, if it ends how it finished in 1920, I'll take that. But I think in terms of 1920, mentioned the managerial change. I think in terms of Villa staying up that season, from my perspective, it wasn't necessary. Well, we tightened up at the end of the season just in the nick of time. But I do think one of the key reasons as to why Villa stayed up was Watford getting rid of Nigel Pearson. I remember hearing that news and thinking you really done us a favour there, because it was in terms of, I remember you got rid of him with, I think it was 2 games to go, and you had Man City at home, and that was on, I think it was a Tuesday, Wednesday night before Villa were playing Arsenal. And I was thinking in terms of, I think you had Graham Stack, I think he was interim manager. There may have been with joint interim manager.
Joint with Hayden Mullins.
Yeah, and I remember before the game thinking, is there going to be, maybe they've been working on something different on the training ground, take City by surprise, but it was in the first 5 minutes of the game. I remember watching thinking, I don't know why you got rid of Pearson, because this is even worse than what was going on. And obviously, we'll skip over the score in that game, but say Watford didn't get the victory on that occasion, and as you said, it went down to the last day. But on Saturday, not the most optimistic from a Watford perspective. But what do you think the score is going to be?
I mean, I'd probably go a comfortable 3-0 win for Aston Villa. I think the first sort of half, from a Watford perspective, it's very much Roy Hodgson, as you've pointed out. He's very much likes to set us up that we don't concede, as any manager would. That might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but in terms of, to the point of, we probably won't attack much. Martinez might as well bring his deck chair and a copy of the Daily Mail for all he cares, because I don't think he's going to have much to do at all in the whole game. The strikers have been called out in, I think today, possibly, or after the game at Brighton. So Roy Hodgson basically said, I've heard how amazing they are, but they're not showing it at the moment. Dennis at one stage, I don't know if it's still the case now, was seconds to Mo Salah in terms of goals and assists combined. You know, there was a real sort of spotlight on him at one stage when he was scoring for fun. Josh King, he's completely declined as well. João Pedro seems to be the only one that he's a real flair player, but we seem reluctant to play him. So, and we're also playing 4 centre mids in a 4-4-2. So, you know, Tom cleverly out on the right mids and Juraj Kuška on the left mid when they're both centre mids. It just makes you wonder what they're trying to do. So, yeah, I think a comfortable 3-0 for Aston Villa, unfortunately. I think it's going to be your defence's lucky day in terms of not having much to do. And I just think that your forward line is frightening. You know, I really like the look of Jacob Ramsey. Philip Coutinho speaks for himself. When you've got someone like Matty Cash and Luca Digne on either side whipping the balls in as well, Watkins, Ings, and I know Ings doesn't get played as much, but you know you've got some real talented players in that squad, and it does frighten me. The only small thing I could possibly say we could possibly get joy out of is sticking either Ismail Assar or Emmanuel Dennis on Tyrone Mings. I know that's a sort of a whole different ball game in terms of is Tyrone Mings a good footballer between Aston Villa fans, because believe me, I've seen my mates have the argument outright in front of me. So, but he has made a couple of mistakes recently. So if we can maybe put Dennis or Sarr on him, see what happens. Obviously, Matty Targett will be relieved that he's moved to Newcastle because he actually got subbed at half time in the first game of the season because Ismail Assar was giving him an absolute nightmare. I don't think he'll have that much fun up against Luca Digne. So, yeah, maybe we try and stick someone on Tyrone Mings, but that's the only way I think we get something. Well, get a goal is through a defensive mistake, because at the moment we've gone from being able to score and not shutting them out at one end to still not shutting them out at one end and not being able to score. So it's quite desperate times for Watford fans and watching Watford. And, you know, I took to social media after the game and I sort of said, you know, for the first time ever, and I've been going to games since I was 6 years old, this is the first time where I've really felt a disconnect from a football club, and it's horrible. And I know Villa fans probably would have felt the same under the old owners, and you know that real turmoil that was going on around the time that you guys went down, and there was that clash with the fans and Micah Richards and various other players against Wickham in the cup, I think it was, and yeah, it's real desperate times at the moment for Watford, and I've just unfortunately resigned to the fact that we'll be playing Championship football next season. But if Roy Hodgson and the starting 11 week in, week out want to show me differently, then be my guest.
Yeah, I mean, momentum is a hard thing to get and easy to lose in football. So it's always, and you know, as you said, Villa have had it in the past. Once you're kind of on a run downwards, you kind of think, oh, where's the next wing going to come? And it can prove a bit tricky. I mean, I think from a Villa perspective for Saturday, we aren't in the greatest run of form. There's been some discussions amongst the fan base, as you mentioned, about some of the players. Tyrone Mings is always a popular debate, you know, very polarizing figure. And we've had the debate on our podcast previously and on our Twitter page, fans regular. We've been accused of being both too pro Tyrone Mings and too anti Tyrone Mings. So I think we're doing an okay job in terms of pleasing nobody. But I think from a Villa perspective, look forward to Saturday. It's you mentioned your attacking players. If they turn up, I think there's the possibility of causing the Villa backline problems. If they don't, then from an attacking perspective, Villa, you know, as you mentioned, they've got some flair players in there who can do damage. I think the first half hour, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's going to be key. The crowd at Villa Park can turn a little, shall we say, if things aren't exactly going to plan. And I think they're just based on where Watford are in the table. There's an expectation that Villa get the win, but you know, you got to go out there and prove it on the pitch. And you know, as you said, Matt Targett's probably really happy he's not there anymore, having nightmares. You know, Sarr turns up. from Villa. I think Villa will win, but in terms of where I can see the problems, you mentioned one there in terms of the Watford team talk is going to be who's the quick lad we can put on Tyrone Mings, who's the quickest today in the warm up in the sprints between the cones that we were doing, and then go at him. And you never know. It takes as you mentioned, a mistake, you get a goal, things get a bit edgy, and you never know. I mean, in terms of trying to get the optimism from a Watford perspective, I mean, I think if Watford do win, I think there's going to be a lot of annoyed Villa fans we're talking about on our next Villa podcast. But from a Watford perspective, you only need one result, and you never know. And in terms
Absolutely.
of from a personal perspective, especially now you got rid of Troy Deeney, I prefer you to stay up than Newcastle. So hopefully you can catch them. But just before you let you go, you gave the game away that you're a Brummie supporting Watford. Yes. How did you get into supporting Watford?
Well, my old man was born in Watford General Hospital, which is a hospital right next door to the grounds. And then he, when he was older, he moved to Birmingham, basically, and met my mum, and the rest is history, as I say. And I grew up as a Watford fan. In school times, it was difficult, obviously, being who Watford. We were lucky to stay up in the Championship back in those days when I was at school, and surrounded by Blues and Villa fans, and Blues were in the Prem, as were Villa back in those days. And only the last sort of few years I've been able to say to a few people, you remember those times you used to bully me about being a Watford fan? Well, we're in the Prem now, sort of thing. So, yeah, it's it is good. I've not managed to get to the games quite easily as and when I can. But as I say, I run a football team in Birmingham on Saturdays, so it's very rare that I go to games now. But I always try and like to do the local ones. Unfortunately, my team have got too big of a game to miss this week, so I won't be making the trip to Villa Park. But yeah, I'm sure there'll be a lot of banter and a lot of text messages and phone calls exchanged come full time, no matter what the score is. Whether it's me making the phone calls or whether it's me turning my phone on silent, I don't know. But yeah, we'll see.
And unsurprisingly, I'm really pleased that the tables have turned in respect to how Watford are doing as compared to Blues. So we can have an whole hour us mocking Blues. It'd be too easy. But maybe our next show. But cheers for joining us, Mike. Much appreciated to get the Watford insight into the game. I mean, apart from Saturday, I hope Watford do well for the rest of the season and catch Newcastle. And in the meantime, Watford fans, check out Twitter, the podcast Voices of the Vic, for all things Watford. And after you've done that, check out the Talk of the Trinity podcast at Talk Trinity Twitter, also on YouTube and Spotify, Apple, all other channels. And you can also have a listen to our Watford preview and also our Newcastle review with me and my regular co-host, Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest. But in the meantime, thanks very much for joining us, Mike. Thanks very much for listening, you at home, and we'll be back with you soon.